I'm so grateful to be joined by my friends, Gabe and Rebekah Lyons. They are not new to the podcast, and I'm just so grateful to have you guys here.
Oh, we love it. It's so good to see you and be with you and talk to you any chance we get.
We recently were chatting. I had you guys on actually to talk about some marriage stuff. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation to talk about something a little different in our family and parenting series because, I think about our lives as authors and ministers. And oftentimes people see, the polished expert version of who we are and what we're teaching. But behind the scenes, we all have these real lives with these real children, routines, making dinner, cleaning up, bedtime, bath time. Like we've got these rituals and routines behind the scenes. And the question is, how on earth do parents manage all of these things,
Hmm.
children in different ages and stages? And I know there's so many people out there feeling overwhelmed by the parenting journey. And so I just want to kind of pick your brains a little bit over the next bit of time of your specific parenting journeys. But before we get into that, before we get into those details, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your family dynamic?
Okay, so Rebecca and Gabe have been married 28 years, and we have four children, ages 24, 22, 20, and 12. We added to our
Wow.
family our 12-year-old 7 years ago when she was 5. So our oldest and our youngest have a Down syndrome diagnosis. Our oldest is biological, our youngest is adopted. So there are bookends. And because our 22 and 20-year-old are in college, our middle son, 22-year-old, is getting married, we feel like we're in this full nesting season. We don't call it empty because it's very full, but
Yeah.
we have this indefinite future with our oldest and our youngest. And so that's kind of the dynamic that we're living in, just our entree to 50s and thinking about the next 20, 30, however many years the Lord has for us of what parenting looks like.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we do often say when we're talking to couples about marriage that if we had no kids, we would have a perfect
We would
marriage
never fight.
because we'd never have a fight. We'd never have an argument. We'd never disagree about anything.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So the children dynamic in any family creates all kinds of opportunities for
Yeah.
miscommunication, for lack of unity, for division. But also as we're experiencing in this season, a richness, it's very full, as Rebekah said, but there's a richness and a blessing that it feels like we're getting to step into a bit as our children get to those ages where they're making their own decisions about life, about marriage, career. And the beauty of that is you go, man, these last couple decades of investment,
Yes. So worth
you
it.
can see some of the fruit of decisions you make early and you had no idea how those
Yeah.
decisions were going to impact things. Just
Yeah.
trusting God and then seeing how he turns even bad decisions for good has been, awesome.
Yeah.
So you have three adult children at this point. I know
Hmm.
your oldest has a Down syndrome diagnosis, but he is, I mean, a man in his 20s. Like, this is incredible. And then, but you still have this little girl that's kind of still in childhood. So three adult kids, one that's still in childhood. So if I had to ask you, what do you feel like the theme that God is pressing on your hearts right now for your family in this
Mm.
stage? Is there a
Yeah.
specific verse or theme or word or phrase that comes to mind?
Well, for me, when you said that, it's embrace, like just
Mm,
embrace them, physically, right? We know the physiological response to holding a hug is releasing that oxytocin and that connection and belonging, but also embrace the season, embrace kind of the fullness. It does feel like a lot, right? So our kids are around. They want to be around. We don't take that for granted. Their significant others want to be around, and we are kind of pinching ourselves and thinking like, I don't know how long this will last, but we're just so grateful for that fullness. We kind of dreamed about the idea of just having kids in proximity or maybe even their kids in proximity, but we know all of this we're not in charge of. So we just trust God for the timing and the providence of it. But in general, I think embrace the season, even if it's like loud sometimes or starts early with some people and ends late some days and late with
Right.
other people. Um, and I don't know. And then I think the other thing that I feel has been so significant in our parenting is the ability for Gabe and I to unite in the way we do it. Cause it did not always look that way. We both have different origin stories of what we were modeled. So we came in with two different ideas, not very different, but just different preferences on what was priority. And so we've learned over time how
Yeah.
to be united.
Yeah. And I would say the other theme we've enjoyed has been this phrase we use a lot: no topic off limits. Parenting. And that's really been part of where we've seen so much unity, especially with our older kids as they were moving through those middle school, high school years, to feel this security and safety and belonging in our home, to where whatever they were walking through, whatever they saw on social media or one of their friends brought up, they knew it was very safe to bring it up with us and to try to learn more about what are they talking about? What does that word mean? Let's talk about sex and like what is God's view of that versus what my friend's telling me.
Right.
Having that kind of environment has created an ability for vulnerability to be embraced, and for our children, I think, to feel like they're safe and seen and known, and there isn't shame, and therefore we have felt, I think, the bounty of knowing that they come to us with anything, like even things we wish they kind of wouldn't bring to us, they still bring it to us, and we get to be in their life in that way, and we don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
For sure.
Is that something that you were intentional about starting when they were young?
I would say not initially, but so I just have always been a little bit more, I kind of joke that I'm a chronic oversharer. And that's one thing to be that with like your girlfriends. It's another thing to be that with your kids.
Yeah.
And yet when they turned, those ages of 13 to 17, they were exposed to a lot of different things. And I found our youngest daughter she's so curious. She would ask me very blatant questions about like, what did I do or not do when I was her age, even physically. And I was like, oh my goodness, are we really going here? What's appropriate? Gabe and I talked. And we just really felt like the truth is always what sets people free. And so I felt like the overarching theme was like, give God glory for the redemption story in all of our lives. And what we found is like, the more honest we were with even our failings, and as vulnerable as we could be, that was appropriate, obviously, then they would see God's love and gospel on display. And in many ways, it turned into them choosing even a path in many ways more righteous than I probably experienced at their age, partly because I, at their age, didn't have anyone to process hard things with. I didn't have a safe place in my youth group or my church. It wasn't they were unsafe. It was just things were taboo and you just couldn't bring it up. So you're left to yourself. So many kids are alone in trying to make godly, wise choices. And we're not meant to be alone in those wrestling thoughts. And so I think that's what catalyzed
and
it.
some of it was forced on us. We lived in New York City. I mean, we were downtown Manhattan. Our kids were in public schools and they would come home. I remember our second grade daughter coming home one day, a boy had called her sexy. And she's like, what does that mean? And, and then in fifth grade, our son came home. One of his friends that was a girl said she had a crush on another girl. And he was trying to make sense of what is that? How do we, and so we found ourselves in those awkward moments you do sometimes as parents. You're not ready for it at that moment, but they bring up a topic and you've got a choice to make. Am I going to shut this down?
Yes.
Or am I going to engage this with as much wisdom and care, which it requires that, and tenderness to understand where that child's at that moment.
Yeah.
And what's the appropriate amount of information to share that helps them learn just enough to feel confident that they weren't shut out of the conversation, but enough to have confidence to know how to engage. And in the case of the fifth grade moment with my son, who's a little bit older, he had to go back to school the next day and engage a conversation. So we were able to essentially walk him through how to do that. And I think those types of things gave us more confidence as parents that we can do this. There's really nothing we shouldn't engage with our kids.
And we would always bring God into it, right? Like that the Lord loves all of us and that everyone's in process on like even recognizing what their sin is, right? Even the conviction, so many people in New York didn't even know Jesus. So it was actually really easy to go like, they just actually haven't been shown or like know like what God even thinks about this or how he designed them or what his intentions are. So it was just helpful for them to even learn clarity with also compassion, I
Yeah.
think, at a young age.
Yeah.
So it didn't become like a religious, self-righteous thing, but more of a, oh wow, there's a lot of people in this world who have different worldviews because of where they wake up every morning and the story they were born into. And how can we as parents support our kids' convictions while also teaching them how to love well and how to
Yeah.
live differently.
I love that. I want to run with this topic a little bit because I think it's something we don't talk about enough. The idea that no topic is off limits, and first of all, I love that you said when I asked you, was this something you were intentional about from the beginning? And you said, well, not really from the beginning, because some people think that, well, we didn't start that way. Our kids are in middle school now, high school, like, well, we missed the boat.
Right.
But you really didn't. Like you said, Gabe, like you get to choose how you engage with every one of these conversations. And it's not a once and done conversation. These conversations are things that constantly come up in different ways, different levels, different themes. And I think part of the key is us looking for those opportunities to take something and maybe go a little bit deeper with it, or they've hinted at something. We ask clarifying questions because it's not as simple as my kid's going to come up to me and say, tell me more about sex.
Yeah.
It doesn't always
Right.
happen that way. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always happen that way. So I would just love to pick your brains a little bit about some of these harder topics, how they've come up, how you've navigated. So the first topic that comes to mind is sex, lust, porn, that whole category.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know in healthy parenting, it's not just a one-time birds and bees conversation. These are conversations that you start having at different appropriate ages from childhood, from when they're little kids. And so, do you have any memories, thoughts, things that come to mind of some of these conversations and how you as parents have navigated them?
Well, we used a series of books that I can't recall the name of for walking our children through what you were just describing, sort of as it related to sex, the biology of how God created male and female, where you keep it so factual and just biological. The
Yeah.
kids at those early ages
Early.
aren't understanding pleasure and interested in how sex could be anything more than just reproductive. And so
Right.
we walked them through that. So that would have opened them up, I think, to even as young children, known that we can talk about private parts. We can talk about how God made us. We can talk about if your friend comes home and tells you something about your body parts, like that's an open conversation for us. And so I think that's for us how we approached it from the earliest years.
Yeah. And then also just being very curious, like always asking questions as parents. I don't think parents ask enough questions. I think they direct traffic and they're
You're
kind of
right.
like they're like cruise directors or camp moms, but
Yeah.
they don't always like ask. They might say, "Do you want peanut butter and jelly or turkey and cheese?" But I'm talking about like how was school, but like who
The
did you
hard questions.
what was your like the way I ask questions a lot is what was your favorite part about your day and what was the hardest part about your day? Like what do you, which
Open-ended.
subject do you love, and why,
Yeah.
a lot of follow-up questions, just getting to know your kids, because when they feel like they can converse with you and you reciprocate, like every friendship requires reciprocity. And I wanted to have a friendship as well as kind of a nurturing guide. Right. So the friendship meant like, you can cry and I'm going to help you get to the heart of what is the pain or what's hurting you. And I remember our daughter at one point was like, why do you always got to go so deep? And then I was like, okay, noted. But at the same point now she's the one that's, in psychology in college. Right. And she is as deep as they go. And I just joked her the other day. I'm like, why do you got to go so deep?
I love that.
It's again, so many things our kids learn is caught. It's not taught. They just see how we model just open conversation. And the more we're honest with our kids, I think when they ask us questions about us, it almost creates vulnerability is costly. Like I could have told our kids some things where they betrayed that and been like, hey, we remember how we said like that was kind of just between you know, so there were certain appropriate things to just like withhold, just for their maturity age. But then
Right.
also there was enough though of trust that needed to be forged. And so becoming a safe place, asking questions. And then it moves from anatomy to desire. And I think that's probably what you're talking about, is a little bit more like, okay, we did the anatomy in elementary and everyone
But I
understands.
do love that you pinpoint anatomy, because I think some parents even struggle with that. And I
Yeah.
have noticed our kids' reception is really based on how we present it. If we're coming like awkward and like, I don't know,
Yes.
then they
Yes.
think it's an awkward subject. But if
Yes.
we're literally just kind of like, here's what it is, and there's
Yeah.
nothing awkward about it, this is just
Right.
how God created it, then they receive it that way too. They don't even know they're supposed to feel awkward about it
Right.
until we start to model that
Right.
awkwardness. So I love that you talk about that first point of just anatomy. Okay, let's move on
Yeah.
to the next point. Desire. I like that.
Right. Because if you talk about anatomy before they hit puberty,
Yep.
then we're a little more prepared to go
Correct.
deeper into like feelings internally or physiologically when they're exposed to something that they weren't looking for, or maybe they were looking for, or maybe they overheard something and now they come home with more questions, because we've been more candid about anatomy and God's intention for design, right? Again, it's all framed in like how God made your bodies and how he knit them in my womb, and that all of them they serve a purpose for your health, your longevity, for fertility, for all these great things down the road. But it's very important to take care of our bodies, even when we're, just talking anatomy. Right. And
Yeah.
then there are parts that are not ever supposed to be public. Right. And like just matter of fact things.
Right.
And so then desire, I remember just a couple conversations, not to be specific, but where one of our children might have gone like, hey, when I watched that, I felt like a little attracted to that. And it wasn't anything crazy, but it might have just been a commercial where a girl's
Yeah.
dancing, or a guy, you know what I mean? Where it's just or the language or the words in a song might be a little like more sexual. And you're kind of like, what does that mean? So at that point, we're like, okay, we're able to talk. We've got some safe trust already built and comfort in conversing. Then it's easier to kind of take one step at a time.
Yeah. And I think when, I was describing fifth grade and, my son having these two friends that were girls having crushes on each other, he wasn't sure whether he was supposed to say something or not. And he actually blurted out when his friend said this to him. This is in New York City, downtown Tribeca elementary school, where the principal was gay. I think his teacher was gay. He basically said, that's against God's laws. So this was his little fifth grade response, which I was like, wow, that's strong.
Yeah.
And the little girls were like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
like you're so weird. Right. And then by the time he walks outside to the end of the school day, he's hearing back from his friends that these kids have said, hey, you don't like gay people.
Wow.
And like he comes home that night trying to wrestle through, what does all this mean? I thought I was just letting them know God's laws, and that's what created such good conversations for us around, you might be right, like morally, like these are God's laws, but you also have to have compassion that these kids have never heard that before in their life. Their parents probably haven't taught them this. It's probably not ever been a conversation. And so there's a real opportunity to be compassionate about this, and even preparing him going back into school the next day, like, hey, you might get called into the principal's office if this is kind of what the buzz is around you and the other kids. And I want to even equip you for that conversation, that you have the freedom to believe what you believe, in your heart about what's right. You can't make anybody else believe that, follow that, do that, but you do have the right to share that. And I don't want you to ever step away from that. So I said, look, you get an A+ for your boldness, and your courage, probably a C on like compassion to understand the moment. But as a fifth grader, right, everything's black and white. There's no nuance here.
Yeah. Is his personality still kind of like that to this day?
Yeah. Yeah. He has a pretty black and white
right, wrong
way of approaching most of life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that shows up early, and you can even realize early how much as a parent, hey, we got to work on that a little bit,
rounding it out, not to erase the conviction at all.
Right.
But the approach is very important. And especially your even the credibility of the relationship the relational equity you already have with the person you're even talking to. Now, they'd been in elementary school together for 3 years, so I'm sure he probably felt pretty comfortable. But at the same point, as we understand, it's that there's a lot of layers to that conversation, and it's hard to approach it just as with a condemnation moment right there. Right. It's just very difficult. And for fifth graders, they were just processing. And it was first time, honestly, he was ever confronted with that about 12 years before now. It's like a long time ago, before there was really even anybody even having to navigate that quite yet.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a different season than we're even in today. One thing I'm noticing is that your boys and girls feel comfortable talking to either of you about different things.
Yeah.
I think that's really special and how it should be. Sometimes it seems like, boys are only supposed to talk to dad about this topic and girls are only supposed to talk to mom about this topic. But interestingly enough, that doesn't really prepare them for marriage when you're supposed to talk to your spouse who's the opposite sex about certain things. So I love the idea that no parent is off limits. Like, you can share with mom that feeling that you had while you were watching a movie, or you can share with mom that you saw something on the internet that you wish you didn't see. You can share with dad about the struggle you're having in your relationship. I love that. How do you think?
Yeah, I want to add to that. So I would say at this point, as our kids are older, my daughter shares more with me on anything on the physical nature for the most part, not emotional. She'll share with both for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Our son will share more with because I do think that's a little more appropriate for him preparing to be a husband, right? Like that he would hear from
Now
Gabe.
that they're adult children.
Yeah, I think so. And even in some of those younger years, he would definitely mention things to me, but I also knew that there was going to be like a man-to-man, good male, like trust and connection, even around male sexuality. Like what does that look like for a male? Dad's going to have more input on that than I am,
right?
In the same way. But yet we would, all four of us, easily talk about sex in general, and it was easy for that to happen. So you're right. There was a crossover on the nuance of how that looked. And it's been wild how it's kind of shifted naturally just in seasons. I would say I'm kind of the go-to on like something really deep and like heart and like angst, maybe like just a very like a grief or something. Cause I just empathy. I'm like high empath in that area. I would say Gabe is probably the first to be approached on, like, I need courage, I need wisdom I need an extra dose of faith right now. Like he's so naturally gifted in the way he calls that out over them.
Yeah. I was just going to go back to this, Deborah, for parents listening, as we were talking about sexuality, porn. So many of our kids today are getting exposed to things they're not looking for. Right. They're, it's impossible with the algorithms.
And just to remember the statistic that the average age of exposure is now 8 years old, like average. So that means way below and way above.
Yeah.
So one of the things we have found when we help parents understand this and they can communicate it to their children, it can really early on in this conversation create room for a lot of conversation and freedom. And that's to say, hey, when you watched that or you saw that because you felt something or your body responded a certain way, this just means your body parts work. This doesn't mean that this is exactly what you're wired for at all. It just means you're watching something that's stimulating, that's erotic, that's something that wasn't appropriate. But if a parent can early on help seed that thought in their children's mind that this doesn't mean you have an identity just because you happen to see something or feel something.
I would just say that attraction doesn't define identity. It doesn't inform identity or confirm identity. What we're attracted to, what we're turned on by or stimulated by truly it's kind of an environmental thing in that moment, right? It's like something I wasn't looking for. All of a sudden I saw it. Now I don't know why my body's responding to that. What does that mean about me? Those are a lot of scary questions, but hey, let's go back to what the scriptures say and what God says you are. And just all identity as a believer is found in Christ. All of our identity are like who he says we are and how he calls us towards him. what he speaks over us. So it's just helpful, whether it's that or anything, any form of like, if I have OCD tendencies or ADHD, that doesn't mean I'm that. It doesn't inform that I'm OCD. That I will always be that. There is never room for repair or anything. It's more just saying that's just something that's that I've come up against, that has been a temptation or a struggle or whatever. And let's invite others into that, like trusted counsel into that. And let's invite God into that and make sure we kind of always are open to kind of this kind of redemption piece of whatever that looks like.
I think the key here is the comfort level in these conversations. And some parents are probably like, I can't even imagine my kids coming up to me and saying, I felt this way, or I saw this. And that's where, as you said, I just want to reiterate that these conversations start young, because you're creating a culture of conversation more than the topic. That's less important. The culture that you're creating is more important, because that can then be a conduit to all different kinds of conversations. And when they realize that no topic is off limits at a young age, and how you respond to those topics that they bring to you matters, right? Like, okay, no topic is off limits, and now they're bringing this topic, and I have to receive this topic in a way that affirms to them that no topic is off limits. Yeah. So how has that been for you? I mean, how, as you're now in the older stages and relationships, and I'm sure there's been mistakes that kids have made along the way, or they've been caught, or it's just part of life. How have you been able to respond with grace, but also that balance of, okay, there's consequences sometimes, there's grace. Like what encouragement could you give with regards to that?
Well, I think that, that culture now that's been established in our home does mean our kids will talk to us about just about anything, including mistakes they've made. And we also include in those conversations the consequences of decisions we make. Just because you're honest about it, vulnerable about it, confess it, you can have forgiveness, but there's always consequences to the decisions we made. And so we're never light on that conversation with them. And I think in a lot of ways that's helped prepare them as they think about the decisions they're going to make, that these decisions have ramifications outside of just mom and dad's approval, but that other people are impacted, affected, can be harmed. There can be consequences at school, at college, with my driver's license, whatever it might be. So I think for parents, even feeling the freedom to have those conversations where you don't have to be the heavy all the time, because there's a lot of environmental structures around life and authority that creates some of that for them.
Natural consequences.
Yes, that's about what I was going to say.
And parents not, making the mistake of trying to soften the blow of some of those consequences. That's a mistake. It's easy to make. You love your children. You hate for them to go through this hard thing or the pain of the consequence. And so you can be tempted as a parent to try to soften the blow. I think we have found, we've made that mistake before, but when you make that mistake, you regret it later. So you just go, no, I need my child as early as possible to learn natural consequences, because when they do, I see the fruit of that in the decision-making that comes later.
Right. Yeah. The natural consequences. It's not even so much if they come to us with just a heart of repentance, like it's really hard to kind of punish, like, okay, and here's the grounding things that are coming after that. Right. If they're caught, it's different. Right. But if they're coming and they're just confessing, just like we do the Lord, he doesn't still keep a record of wrong and make us pay penance, but there will be natural fruit. Whatever you sow, you reap. Right. That's a law of God. So there will be natural consequences that just happen in their life. There's sometimes break of relationship. There's unhealth. There's a loss of trust that might happen that requires repair that will take some time, but in the end, it's for me, it's been so easy to invite God into all of it. Like we're praying through all of it with them. We're always like, and then we're also acknowledging as parents, which really helps with your kids, how we did this at their age. The ways in which we made decisions that we weren't proud of, that we probably didn't even confess. Like I've with tears told my kids, like watching you guys learn how to repent and repair and heal brings me to tears, because I did not learn that at your age.
Wow.
I had a little more of a hardened streak, a little more of a rebellion. I kind of would tell the Lord, but never would go tell other people, like confess to someone, like an actual person. And so to affirm the courage that they're taking gives them the desire to stay that way, to continue in that way, right? Like, not to punish them, just like we wouldn't to each other. If Gabe came to me with a confession, I'd be like, well, I thought so. And now you're in the doghouse, like no one responds well to that when they've already extended themselves vulnerably, knowing they're a little afraid of like how you're going to respond. And I really do think the grace of God, yes, there will be some wounding and some healing required, but the grace of God, the gospel is true. And if we can live that well, then I think, there's not a fear of coming to us. I don't want there to ever be a fear, like we're going to be rejecting them, or silent treatment, or breaking relationship, or at least putting them at arm's length. Or I even felt convicted when they're in their teens, or like early teens, to sending them to their room, because that meant punishment means separation and breaking relationship. And so I'm sorry, that's not a good response. Come back down when you're ready, and let's just keep talking about this.
Yeah, I love that. I really do think there is something to be said about how we approach a repentant heart, because we're either positively enforcing, this is what we want to see, this is good, keep bringing things to us, nothing is off limits, or we're reinforcing, okay, you confessed, but now you're about to get it, like, oh, you just trapped yourself. And it's like, do I tell? Do I not tell? Do I tell? Do I not tell? And not that there's no consequence. Like you said, there are natural consequences, but then I also think something I find myself saying to the kids is, okay, let's talk about this. What do you think the next steps should look like? Maybe even not using the word consequence, but what do you think repair? I love the word repair. When there's a rupture, you need to repair. What does repair look like in this situation? And then maybe they'll say, well, I should probably not be on my screen for the next week. Okay. Anything else? Like really talk through the consequence, the boundaries, the next steps towards repair with them. Builds affirmation and reinforcement rather than squashes exactly what we're trying to build. And I understand it's not like a cookie cutter answer, but it just really gets parents thinking, because sometimes we say we want to create this culture where nothing is off limits, but then when they bring something, we react in a way that tells them actually this stuff is off limits.
Right. One thing I would add to that real quickly is that, it tells us in the scriptures that before we take the bread and the cup, to examine the heart, right? And so sometimes in our own lives or with our kids, we might notice like, oh, we were triggered by something. And so sin might look like, oh, I got tempted here and I didn't want to get tempted. But what we're always trying to do in our own lives, and then in asking our kids, is like root cause, right? So if a kid came and an adult child was like, I was feeling these intrusive thoughts the other day, and then it kind of was like wanting to meander or whatever. And I said, okay, what was that? What do you think triggered that? Like, I will always go to root cause, like what kind of environment, because we're not supposed to put ourselves in the path of temptation. So how adjacent were you to it, for starters, and how can you proactively kind of look back and go, oh yeah, I can see how just a couple circumstances added up to where all of a sudden, something that hasn't been a struggle ever or for a long time might have tried to surface again. And so we're always trying to be aware in advance. And so that, I think, is how we engage each other now with that, and how we would engage our adult children with that. It's not a like, here's your consequence at all, because that's behavior management.
Right.
What I really want to get back to is going the heart, the motives of the heart, like what of the heart was shutting down, and why do you think that was happening? Was there some unresolved stuff that you're just trying to push down? Because often our behavior stems from an unhealth where we're just trying to avoid pain. So like, let's just get keep it there. And sometimes it's just like a counseling session would be with any safe, trusted counselor, biblical counselor, would go like, what do you think was going on?
Right.
And the Holy Spirit will speak to them and speak to us in those moments and convict us of sin. That's a gift of the Spirit, is to convict us of sin, to go from not condemnation, but invitation right back into relationship.
I do
Yeah.
think a lot of that's easier as the children are now adults. So they're able to have these kind of conversations. I realize if you're a parent and your child's 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, they may not be able at a maturity level to engage some of the depths of what we've been able to plunge with our children these years. And so parents having a united front to how they want to engage a child that continually is rebellious or continues to show a defiant spirit is really important. And I think even being able to communicate that to the child, after you're seeing a pattern develop, that you do as parents have a unified front on here's what's going to happen the next time you do this.
Right.
Or if you don't clean your room by Friday at 5 o'clock, well, I'm going to have your sister clean the room and I'm going to pay them the allowance that you thought you were going to get. And you're still going to be grounded this weekend, in a non-emotional, matter-of-fact way. That's the key. Because for parents, we get emotional too quickly with our own children, and we lose our credibility with them. And that's, of course, their goal. They want to divide us. They want to see us get a little amped up. And so the more as parents you're settled on, like, hey, here's how we're going to approach this the next time it happens. And then we communicate that to the child. I think that can be a good way to start to build some boundaries in and expectations. But then the key is, as parents, you got to stick with it. You can't let them off the hook too early on those consequences. Maybe every now and then there's some grace, but I think in general, you're trying to train them for the future of being an adult, where there will be consequences to defiance. There will be consequences to sin. And we're not preparing them well if we just act as if you can kind of get away with these things in our home.
You're getting a little bit of a up close glance on like the ways in which we
I know
nurture.
different parenting styles for sure. And they're all necessary.
Yes,
they're all necessary.
It complements.
And it's like a recipe. Sometimes you need 2 doses of this, 1 dose of that. Sometimes you need 3 doses of this one, 0 doses of that one, depending on what's going on in the situation. And when you have both of those ingredients and you put them together in different ways, it's an asset to the family. And I think some parents do struggle. Like I love that you're able to be united front, even though you're different. You don't have to be the exact same personality, the exact same parenting style in order to be able to come together and be a united front, because you're influenced by each other. You're trusting the other person. You're feeling out the situation. Maybe we need 2 doses of Gabe here, 1 dose of Rebekah. Maybe the next one, we need 3 doses of Rebekah, 1 dose of Gabe. And you're both united on that. And I think that's the beauty of it, because you are different, but you're still able to be united. And I think sometimes parents feel like they're so different from their spouse, but when you use that well, it can be such an asset to the family. You mentioned that your kids like to hang around even now. Tell me, what are some things that you've done practically that are like fun together, different ages and stages from 12 and up to 20s? Like, what are some things, like if I had a video camera and I was watching you guys over the past couple of years, what are some things I would see that were connection, relational, fun, togetherness, family?
Well, we're always having a meal together. I'm cooking more than I ever have in our entire marriage, even with adult kids that are coming and going, or they're people that are coming and going. I just love us all being in the kitchen, dance party. I mean, we act pretty stupid with each other. We goof off a lot. We laugh a lot. My kids think mocking me is just like their favorite sport right now. And I just wind up laughing with them because it's my daughter. She's just so quick. Her wit is so fast, and I like admire it. And so I think just having fun with your kids and laughing with them, but then also being like, okay, someone's doing the dishes, I'm out, and just having that partnership or shared kind of rhythm. It does help that we have Kate and Joy as our bookends to draw the siblings home. I'm not saying they're always around because of just Gabe and I at all. Like they love their siblings and their siblings love them. And so we almost have these extra two magnets that kind of pull the bigs, is what we call them, back home, or they at least want to come over for dinner or something like that, or hang out on the weekend and we'll go swimming at the pool or whatever. So just finding those recreational things. We took Sabbath seriously in high school with them. And then, our son went away for college for a couple of years. Our daughter went away as well. She's finishing now locally, but still
So
they
you've
have
already launched a few out into the world.
they have full lives, but the return is sweet. And I love this idea of this home is always the place you return to, and they want to come home often. And I love that. I'm really thankful for that.
Well, we work together. I mean, there's chores to do, there's work to be done. And one of the things, a couple Father's Days ago, Rebekah and I were talking, like, what do you want for Father's Day? And the kids, they were doing their last minute like shopping and what can we get for Father's Day for Dad? And I told Rebekah, I think this year what I want is for each of the kids to learn a skill that is working with their hands, is actually part of what I'm supposed to be doing as a father, like training them up to be prepared. And there's these areas that I feel like as they're getting older, I've not really done a good job in. So I'd rather this year, Kennedy, she committed to learning how to make sourdough. So Rebekah taught her that. I didn't know how to teach it, but Rebekah did. My son learned skills in a lot of woodwork. And that meant like everything from cutting down trees to splitting wood to all the things that went with building fires and all of that. And so now that's become a part of our rhythm with our kids. Is they also know when they're around, we're going to be kind of shoulder to shoulder on some things, doing work together. And I can't tell you the depth of conversations I've been able to have with my son when we're out splitting wood together versus when we're just having a coffee and looking at each other talking. So much more starts to come out when we're creating those kind of environments where it's just unexpected, but things come up and you have this opportunity as a parent to pour into your children and to explore new topics and areas with them.
Yeah, that side by side and that face to face. It's different kind of engagement.
Yeah. And I think it's something parents either do one or the other. It's either like, okay, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets, or we're just driving in the car and nobody's talking. But the beauty of being side by side for the goal of connection and taking those opportunities when you are side by side to check in, to talk, to put effort into it. I think that's a really beautiful thing. So many great themes out of this conversation. And, it's exciting to talk to you because I think sometimes parents in the younger stages get really nervous about the teen years, about the young adult years, feeling like they're slowly going to start disconnecting from their kids rather than seeing the opportunity for the relationship to evolve and grow, for the friendship to get deeper and more intimate, for the connection to get stronger. And it's inspiring because you don't have to be afraid of that season of parenting. It could be your best season yet. And it seems like that's how it's playing out for you guys. So I just so appreciate your conversation today, hear how you kind of pulled back the curtains on your family, and just so grateful for what you guys are doing. Yeah. Tell people where they can learn more about your family, your ministry, each of your different platforms, and all the things that you have going on.
So you can find me at RebekahLyons.com, and all of our events that we do marriage and parenting retreats. We do emotional health retreats. We're really just trying to serve families on the front lines, in every sphere of what they're dealing with and navigating, even relationships under vocation and calling, and raising kids, recognizing calling in kids. We talk a lot about mental health, and that's kind of been my story. So RebekahLyons.com. And then
our work together, we started 20 years ago, is called Think, THINQ, or thinkmedia.com. There's a lot of resources there for parents, for kids in the next gen, trying to navigate some of the topics we were just discussing, these cultural issues that are not always easy. Even Sunday morning at a church to hear good teaching on, you don't always know how to dig into some of these. And so we've created a lot of resources around all the different topics, whether it's artificial intelligence and social media and mental health, to sexuality, transgender, those kinds of topics that I know parents are curious where to get trusted resources, and they can go for free, get a free account at thinkmedia.com and get access to all those resources.
And I highly
And then we
recommend
have our own
it.
podcast. We have
Yes,
our own
tell
podcast,
us about that.
Rhythms for Life. We've been co-hosting that for 6 years.
Of which Deborah is a frequent guest.
Frequent
I
flyer.
love it. I love it. I honestly recommend what you're doing to a lot of people. I just had a client tell me that your most recent book, The Fight for Us, was so helpful for them. And the conversation we had on the podcast just really opened their eyes to a lot of things and took their marriage to the next level. So the resources that you are putting out there are not in vain. And I highly recommend that you who are listening, go connect with what they're doing and be inspired to do what God has called us to do outside of the house and inside of the house where it's the most important. So thank you guys. It was so good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for all
Deborah.
you do, Deborah.